During a high school class project, my teacher told me it's unrealistic being a CEO. It's been my dream to be a CEO since I was 10, so I told her it is realistic. Follow me on my journey to learn what it takes to become a CEO. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Realistic CEO Podcast. Today I'm here with Ryan Alekman. How are you doing today, Ryan?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. So thank you for coming on today.
I appreciate the invite.
Thank you. The first question I want to ask you is, can you tell us a little bit about what you guys do here at your business?
Sure. So at Alekman DiTusa, we represent people who are injured in car accidents, dog bites, slip and falls, motorcycle accidents, pretty much any way other than a medical malpractice that somebody could be injured. We're trying to help that person recover from their injuries financially. And so that's our goal, is to help people who've been injured.
Can you tell us a little bit about your journey to how you got to where you are today?
Sure. My grandfather was a lawyer in New York. Unfortunately, he passed away when I was about 8. My mother, after I was born, went to college. She went to law school, which is not easy with kids. And she was a lawyer from probably the time I was about 10, maybe 9. She practiced for, I don't know, 20 years or so. And so I grew up around lawyers and the law. A lot of my family members are lawyers or went to law school. And so I started with that. When I got out of college, I made a mistake. I majored in legal studies at UMass, thinking I want to be a lawyer. I should major in something that has to do with the law. And looking back, when I talk to people about it, I should have majored in something that was more business related, because I've always been an entrepreneur at heart and have had businesses that I ran from a very young age. And so went to college, got out of college with my legal studies degree, took a year off before college, worked in law firms for lawyers that I found they were looking for somebody in the newspaper, back when there were people looking for jobs in the newspaper. And worked for a year working for other lawyers, went to law school at Wennick, which is now a university, Western New England University. Got out of law school, was looking for a job to go work for somebody else, and had an offer, but it didn't work out, thank goodness. And somebody that I had spent a summer working for, another lawyer, the summer before my last year of law school, said, what are you doing? I ran into him in the grocery store. I mean, things just happen, right? Ran into this guy in the grocery store. He said, what are you doing? And I said, I don't know, I'm looking for a job. He said, why don't you use the office that you used when you worked for me over the summer, and I'll feed you a little bit of work, help you get your start. I won't charge you rent. And he didn't charge me rent for, I don't know, maybe the first 8 months or a year. And I was able to get my practice started. And so, things happen in this world. Not everything is planned out. And so that's how I got my start. And I was on my own. I rented. First, he wasn't charging me rent, and I rented for about 5 years from him. And I moved out into my own office, and was alone with my staff there for a few years. And then Rob DiTusa and I met, and we decided to work on some cases together. And he rented office space from me. And after a few years of doing that, we realized we worked really well together, and we joined our practices. And Alekman DiTusa was born. January will be 15 years.
So for anybody that wants to become a lawyer, what is some advice that you would give to that person to make sure that they can become a lawyer?
Becoming a lawyer, obviously you need a college degree. Maybe it's not obvious, but it's obvious to me, given that I'm a lawyer. You need a college degree and you need to go to law school. If you go full-time, it's 3 years. If you go at night, it's 4 years. I think it's just a matter of, there's a lot of law schools out there. If you have the drive and the desire to do something, you can get it done. You study, you work hard. I was not the best student. People always assume with all the education that I have that I was a great student. I see with my kids that they are great students, and that's great. I'm more of a physical do something kind of person, as opposed to watch other people teach you how to do it and learn. I learn better by doing. And so I've been doing this almost 27 years, and I think I'm better now than I was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, and going back to my beginning.
So for any lawyer that wants to start their own firm, what is the process of being able to start your own firm?
As a lawyer, we call it hanging a shingle, right? And you can basically rent an office, or not even these days, because so many things are remote, and get the word out that you're doing it. And there's so many different ways of advertising. I'm fortunate. My junior year in college at UMass, I actually spent studying in Spain, and I had taken Spanish classes throughout in high school and then a little bit in college, and I became fluent in Spanish. And so when I got out of law school and started my practice, I was able to speak with a lot of the community that feel underrepresented, because there might be a paralegal somewhere that speaks Spanish, but having a lawyer that you can speak directly to in Spanish in Western Massachusetts was a rare thing. But for other people, I think it's just finding what you're good at, finding what interests you. And some people try to do everything. And my mother, I love her, but she tried to do everything. She did bankruptcy, she did divorce, she did criminal defense, she did a little bit of personal injury, and she did it because it came from a good place where she was trying to help people. But when you try to do everything, you don't do a lot of things as good as you could if you focus. So I think it's important to figure out what it is that you think you want to do. And to me, I think the best advice I can give a new lawyer who's starting in practice is to get a mentor. And if you can rent space where there's other lawyers who are experienced, you're going to learn a lot more from them than you do in law school. A lot of law schools don't have classes on how to run a business. And I know UConn Law School has a class because a colleague of mine, who's a friend of mine down in Connecticut, just started running a law office class down at UConn. But most of the time, I think having good people around you is always the best advice, probably in any business. If I guess I were to be a little more concise, find space with other lawyers, people you can run things by, talk to. They could probably feed you work and help you out, help you get your start.
When you first are starting, how are you able to find clients that are willing to work with you?
That's a good question. I was actually very fortunate. One of my law school classmates was working for a lawyer in Springfield, and the guy that was cleaning his office needed a lawyer. And I said, it was about a week before I got sworn in, I said, happy to represent you. I can't do anything until I take the oath and I'm officially a lawyer. He called me back the first day I was back. I think it was the next day after I got sworn in, and he was my first client. And that, again, sometimes things just happen. And so he actually was my first client, and we still keep in touch with Facebook friends. I've known him 27 years, almost. So that's how I found my first client. And then I started advertising on Spanish radio, focusing on the thing that made me different from other lawyers. So that's how I got my start. And then lawyers would feed me work, and they heard there was someone that spoke Spanish. And being in Springfield, speaking Spanish is a huge asset. Again, I'm fortunate because my mother wouldn't let me study in Australia where I wanted to go. She said, you got to go somewhere where they speak another language. I went to Spain, picked up Spanish, and actually met my wife there when we were studying in Spain. We were in the same program. She's from Maine, I'm from Massachusetts, and things just happen.
As a lawyer,
Yeah.
when you're preparing, whether it's to make sure that you're giving the clients the right information, or you're making sure that you have all the details, what's the process of making sure that you're giving your best effort to all your clients?
I think that's a great question. Unfortunately, a lot of lawyers don't look at what we do as a service industry, and really what we are is a service industry. I used to wait tables, and I did all sorts of other things before law school, and even before high school I was working jobs. And in order to give clients the best advice, you really need to listen, right? Too many people spend their time talking, and if somebody comes to you, they're coming to you with a problem. And if you don't understand the problem, you can't help them solve the problem. And sometimes you can't help somebody solve a problem, but often you can, and it starts with listening.
What is something that you learned that's like your biggest aha moment so far with being a lawyer?
Wow. I'm always learning. And so I don't know if there was a moment where things clicked like that, but I don't know that there was one particular moment that, as I sit here today, that I can think of and say, okay, that was the moment that things clicked and I was able to really execute at my fullest. I think it's more, for me, it was a slope, and everything grows and grows as you go up, and you end up knowing more now than you did before. And that's why I love doing what I do, is because every day is different. I never know. I could wake up in the morning and have a great plan, and I think probably a lot of business owners will say this. Plans are great, but you need to be able to react. You need to be able to know your business, to know what it is that you're doing, because there are times when the phone rings and you just respond. And we've had multiple times where we had to drop everything we're doing because something happened, whether it's on a case we already had, or there was a news story out and then the news was contacting us and our phone started ringing about, maybe a case against a hospital or something. And I think it's The good part of practicing law is that your mind is hopefully open and you're able to react with, and law school doesn't necessarily teach you how to practice law. Teaches you how to think like a lawyer. I've probably done it my whole life just from being exposed to it with my mother and my grandfather and the conversations that we would have, because law school for me came easier than it did to my friends because I was already thinking that way. But it's how you gather information, you listen, and then how you analyze things and move forward. And as you learn more, there's more nuances. And so it's like an onion that way. You start looking at something and you might think you're going this way, and then you peel back another layer and you're actually going that way. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
I did. So growing up being around lawyers, how has that been like a big influence into you becoming a lawyer, or was it more of a you seen it then you're like as you got older you wanted to become a lawyer?
one of my friends, so when I was in high school, I actually did some work for my mother, typing things up on the old Mac computer back in the day. And so I was exposed to the law and doing those sorts of things. I had a friend in my high school yearbook that wrote that I was going to be a good lawyer. So I think I knew I was going to be a lawyer. I didn't necessarily know the path I was going to take and what kind of law I was going to do. But those jobs that I worked for the year between college and law school were personal injury firms. And I realized that I could do that. So I had an exposure to personal injury fairly young. And I knew, and they were in Massachusetts, so it was all Massachusetts law. Yeah.
What has been your favorite moment so far of being a lawyer?
Wow. My favorite moment about being a lawyer, it'd be very easy to say I make good money and I support my family, but probably the thing that I love that we do is that we give back to the community. And so when, it's great to be successful, I'm not going to lie to you, but there's a saying that with great success comes responsibility. And I'm very proud that we take that very seriously. So not only do we help our clients, but we're always giving back to the community through the food bank and through Square One and all that. And I know you read to the kids recently at Square One. Just being able to give back is probably the thing I like the most.
So you said you make a lot of money and you're able to support your family with the money that you make, but yet your favorite moment is still being able to help the people in your community. Why is it that helping people in your community is important to you?
I think to me, it's part of the deal. If you're fortunate enough to find something and that you're successful at it, I think it's just how I was raised. I think it's ingrained. It's something that you don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. It's automatic. And there's so many different charities that we've worked with. And the things that I've enjoyed the most, for example, Revitalize. Every year they do Green and Fit. And we go and volunteer. And it feels good to give back. We've represented thousands and thousands of people. I love when our clients appreciate us, right? Whether it's through a review or sending their family members, or going back to that first client, I've represented, over the years, his kids, his grandmother, his stepfather. My first $1 million case was his brother-in-law. Or maybe it's his cousin-in-law. So that's fairly gratifying when you have people that appreciate what you do. When you wake up in the morning and you matter to people outside of your family because you're helping them. Again, giving back is just an extension of helping people, whether it's I'm helping them by representing them or I'm helping them because the people that I represent enable me to give to other people. That's important.
What is the difference between a lawyer and an attorney?
To my knowledge, there's none. Sometimes you'll say, I'm an attorney at law. Some people say that being a lawyer is somebody who studies the law. But essentially, it's the same job. It's the same, whether you call yourself, nobody really says Ryan Alekman lawyer. They say attorney Ryan Alekman or Ryan Alekman attorney at law. But I'm not aware of any substantial difference. That's a good question, though.
Thank you. I always wanted to know, because I've seen people say that.
I mean, maybe if you Google it, someone will come up with an answer, and I don't even know what I do for a living, and I don't know what my title is, but to me, they're the same thing.
So when you're going into, let's say you might have to go into court for a case.
Sure.
What is the difference between when you have to go into court versus when you can settle it before you have to get into court?
Most of our cases settle, and on the civil side, so the personal injury side, I did criminal defense for 25 years, so you're always going to court. Whether you went to trial or you had a plea bargain, right, and you worked out a deal, or you went in unagreed with the prosecutor, A plea bargain is essentially a settlement, right? And you just need the judge to approve it. On the civil side, when you can settle a case, it depends on the reason that you're settling. If you're settling because the insurance company offered you a fair amount of money and or the policy limits, you're not going to do any better, that's fantastic. Sometimes you settle cases because you have a client who has financial need that they can't get out from under, and you're settling it short. But that doesn't happen that often. We work to really help our clients get the full amount of money that they deserve. And if an insurance company is not offering it, we file a lawsuit. And even after you file a lawsuit, people think, oh, you filed a lawsuit, you're going to go to trial. Maybe 5% of those cases actually go to trial. They usually settle because the insurance companies don't want to have that risk either.
So you said that you worked in criminal defense and you also do civil, like injuries and stuff. So what is like the difference between when you're preparing for a case that involves a criminal defense versus a civil, like injury cases?
So on the criminal side, the prosecution has to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, right? So if I'm representing somebody, say they're charged with drunk driving, I don't have to prove anything, right? My client sits there, they're presumed to be innocent. The Commonwealth, which is Massachusetts, has to prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt. On the civil side, you're flipping it, and now we have the burden to prove our case that the person that was driving that car, say that rear-ended our client, that they were at fault for causing our client's injuries. So we actually have to prove something as opposed to we can't just sit back and say, no, you prove it. We actually have to prove it, but we don't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. We only have to prove it, it's called preponderance of the evidence. So we have to prove that it's more likely something is true than not true. So if you imagine the scales of justice, they don't, in a criminal defense case, the Commonwealth has to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a very high burden. But on the civil case, it just has to tilt it just a little bit in order for us to be successful in our case.
Why did you switch from criminal to civil?
I didn't switch. I started out doing both. I started out doing mostly civil just because I didn't have a way to get criminal defense cases. And about 6 months after I got sworn in, because I speak Spanish, I was able to get into the bar advocate program. And people talk about public defenders. So in Massachusetts, we have bar advocates and public defenders. Public defenders work, the state pays them a salary, they're employees of the state. The public defenders, essentially, we're running our own practice. The state is paying us an hourly rate, but we can do our own practice. So I got into that program after practicing for about 6 months because I spoke Spanish, and they train you, and so you get used to being in court. So I was doing both at the same time. Both are interesting. The criminal defense, a lot of it is sitting around in court waiting for your case to get called. As my civil practice took off, I didn't have as much time to sit around doing essentially nothing, especially back in the days before there were cell phones. I'd be sitting there waiting for somebody to call my office, and then I carried a pager around and would go out to the payphone sometimes and return phone calls. Things are a lot easier now to be in two places at the same time because you have a phone that can do a lot of that. But yeah, I've always done both.
What has been your favorite case so far?
Wow. I don't know that I have an answer for that. I think I look back on doing this for almost 27 years. I've represented literally thousands of people. And hopefully for every one of them, I really made a real difference in their lives. I think my first $1 million case, looking back and getting the policy limits for a guy who was hit by a dump truck head on, that was a really important case. But to me, it's, I don't know that I have a favorite. I think it's more about knowing that I'm appreciated and really made a difference in someone's life. And hopefully there's thousands of cases like that. I don't know. People sometimes show appreciation, sometimes they don't, and that's okay. Everybody's different.
When you first started, did you think that you would be as successful as you are today?
Never. Not even close. My first 5 years, I didn't have a secretary. I had nobody answering the phones but me and my answering service. And when I hired my first employee back after 5 years, I said, wow, I've really made it. I've got somebody doing some work for me. And then as you start growing and you delegate more, and now I think between the lawyers and the staff, we're close to 20 people now. Never in a million years did I think that I would have represented as many people and helped as many people as I have. And no.
In my book, Realistic CEO, Tony, he talks about the LBW, the long, lonely, born work. So can you tell us about the LBW that you had to do to get to where you are today?
I think it starts with law school for me, and a lot of reading, really studying, and then there's a lot of times that you're looking for that needle in a haystack. Maybe it's something in the medical records that really shows that you can show to an insurance company or show to a jury, hey, this really was caused by this accident. And there's a lot of tedious work, but we actually had a case, we did a class action against Progressive Insurance Company about 10 years ago, and we were successful. It's probably longer now. There were, I couldn't tell you how many tens of thousands of documents we had to look through. And my partner Rob and I were in the office on a Saturday, because that's what you do when you're working hard. Being an entrepreneur is not a 9 to 5 job, and you know that, but a lot of people don't. And we were in the office going through page after page of all these documents, and something clicked, and I saw something, that needle in the haystack, and it turned the whole case around, and we were able to settle that case. The class of people that we represented, I think there were about 4,000 people, if I recall, and I think each one would have gotten about $2,000 had they made the claim. So it was a good case. Going through documents can be really tedious, long, boring, but it has to be done. But it's not boring when you find that needle, and it gives you a lot of excitement and making a difference for I think it was about 4,000 people. Really, that was pretty cool.
So what is a class action case?
So class action, so if I sued an insurance company saying you wronged my client, and I represent just John Smith, say, that's not a class action. I'm just representing one person. When you have a class action, you're representing a class of people who are like John Smith. They were harmed in the same way. And rather than represent one person, sometimes class actions can be hundreds of thousands of people. They bought a product that didn't work the way it was supposed to, or in our case, the insurance company really screwed people out of coverage that they shouldn't have, and we were able to show that. People could have had coverage for their medical bills that would have been paid, and it would have, for their family members, their premium, so what they paid for insurance wouldn't have gone up at all. So the insurance company really played fast and loose, and so we were able to represent, instead of just John Smith on that case, we ended up with, like I said, about 4,000 people.
What is the difference between like when you're preparing for a class action versus when you're just preparing for one person to support?
I think you have to look to see if everybody has suffered in the same sort of way. And so we've had cases, we've been looking at them, and we think that most of the times when we've done class actions, it involves insurance companies. They didn't pay something they were supposed to pay. Maybe it's interest or something that they owed people. And so if it happened to our client, likely happened to other people. And if we think it happened to a lot of people, we'll send our letters and file our papers on behalf of the class, and then you start looking into it and say, okay, yeah, there really were a lot of people affected by this. And you have to explain, you go through what's called discovery, so you're doing written questions, which are called interrogatories. You're doing production of documents, where you're sending requests for documents, and they have to send you back documents, and vice versa. And then sometimes we're doing depositions, and we're asking people questions in person. And I forgot your question. Sorry.
No, that's okay. You answered the question.
Oh, good.
Yeah, you did. What is some advice that you would give to a young entrepreneur wanting to start their own business?
I think get out and do it. So when I was a kid, I grew up outside of Boston when I was 10 years old, and I was fortunate. I didn't have to work. I didn't have to help support my family, but I've always liked having a little money in my pocket, whether it's to buy comic books and candy or whatever it was. And so at 10 years old, I'd go door to door after a snowstorm and shovel driveways. And maybe it was because I was a cute kid, but I worked hard. And we're in New England, especially back in those days, the snowstorms were bigger than they are now. And you just got to do it. And as I got older, I'd put up signs to, whether it's to shovel driveways, mow lawns. But if there's some service that you can offer it, figure out what you're going to charge somebody to do it, and make sure when you get hired, make sure you have an agreement for how much you're going to get paid. Because I remember one time somebody thought they were paying me $3 an hour to shovel a driveway, and that is really, even back then, that was really hard work. It was a huge driveway. I think I was 12 and my brother was 16, and I had him help me, and the people were paying at the end thought paying me $3 an hour was fair. That might have been minimum wage, but nobody's going to shovel a driveway by hand for a minimum wage. So I think it's important to know what service you're going to offer, figure out what you're going to charge somebody, and value yourself. And I follow your father, and he's got all sorts of great advice on Facebook, and some of the things that he's talking about. Value yourself, and if somebody doesn't want to pay you, that's okay. Move on. One of the things I learned from my mother practicing law is she said if there was a case you don't want to take, maybe there's a criminal case or something I didn't really want to do, if you raise your fee and you say, okay, this is what it's going to cost to make me want to do it, either the person walks away and they say, no harm, no foul, or they pay you and you want to do the work for that kind of money. It's not always limiting yourself because, I don't want to do that. It's figuring out what it's worth to you to do that thing. And I don't want to go back and shovel driveways anymore at my age. But if somebody wants to pay me, throw out some huge number, I'd probably shovel their driveway. Just know your worth and value your hard work, and really just get out and do it. There's even if you already have a job, as long as it doesn't conflict with what your job is, either from time or have some conflict with your employer. Running your own business is hard. But at the end of the day, it's really the only way that I know that people make substantial money, substantial difference you have. And probably one of the best things about running a business is I work from home a lot of mornings. As the boss, I'm able to do that. And I'm able to be more productive because of what I do by starting in earlier in the morning because I haven't left the house yet. It's the freedom. And whether it's returning phone calls from a trip to Africa, which I've done, but I'm still able to go to Africa. It's just that being an entrepreneur enables you to have freedom. And that's really, people talk about having the money to buy things. To me, as I've gotten more successful, it's having the freedom to do things.
What is some advice that you would give your younger self when you first started your business?
With the experience I have today, I probably would go back and hire somebody earlier, because it would have freed me up to focus on the things that require my level of skill. And so one of the things I've attended classes, going back to earlier when I was talking about I wish I had majored in something like business or something, because they don't teach that in law school, is as you have the time and you attend classes, whether it's on being a lawyer or it's business, I remember seeing there was like a triangle or a pyramid, and as the person with arguably the most skill at a business would be in a law office would be the lawyers. And so the lawyer should only do what requires lawyer skills. And if you can delegate, you can do more of the stuff at the top and have your staff do the stuff that requires maybe a paralegal and then maybe a legal assistant. And so that people are really doing what requires their level of skill. And so for me, it would be if I hired somebody earlier, didn't wait 5 years, I think I probably could have maybe relaxed a little bit more at that time instead of doing absolutely everything. I was handling criminal defense, and I probably had 100 injury cases before I even hired somebody. And that was a lot of work, and so it was a lot of hours. So that would have probably enabled me to be home more with my little kids at that point. So yeah, I think that would probably be the thing that I've learned that I would probably tell myself is also believe in yourself. Because, and I go back to this, things happen. Things really do happen. If you're out there and you're working hard, that's the best way to be successful.
I got a couple more questions for you.
No, you got all the time in the world.
So what is some advice that you would give to me so I can become a realistic CEO?
I think you are a realistic CEO, right? You're already running a business. You've got your book out. You've got a brand out. I don't particularly think of myself as a CEO as much as an entrepreneur, but ultimately they're probably the same thing. Whether you're a CEO of a business that somebody else started or you're the CEO of a business you started, which would be more of the entrepreneur, you need a lot of the same skills. Work hard, believe in yourself, and I think you're already there. I think you really believe in yourself, and I think there's no question you're going to get where you need to be. Now, what sort of business you're going to run, that's up to you, but when you figure that out, you're going to be successful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Got one more question for you.
Sure.
What's one fun fact about yourself that nobody really knows?
Fun fact. So I've been taking photographs for 20 plus years, and lately I've really gotten into wildlife photography. And I'm starting to have I have a gallery that's opening later this week at the vet's office where I bring my dogs, but people are going to be able to go see my photographs. I've been to Kenya twice. I've been to Alaska. Next year I have a couple of trips planned to South America and Africa. And going back to giving back, the photos that or the calendars I sold from my trip to Kenya. The 2 times I've been there, I've donated the money. And there's a school in Kenya that we funded. The first year we funded a water project. The kids used to have to literally go down, maybe walk a mile down to the river, encountering animals or whatever with buckets, carry the water back to the school, and the water wasn't clean. And now the kids have clean water. So to me, that's fun. And goes to giving back. This year, the photos I'm selling at the vet's office, the money's going to Dakin, which helps animals. So it's just using your skills to help others you're never going to go wrong.
Thank you for coming on today.
I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So thank you guys for watching this episode of the Realistic CEO podcast. And another thing, I appreciate everybody that has supported me so far. So the way that you guys can help support me is by buying my book, Realistic CEO, on my website at realisticceo.com. Also, you can buy my merch, my shirt right here. You can buy it on the website. And lastly, if you want, you can also donate books. And with the donations, you guys can help me go into schools and read the books to the kids in school that need it. So thank you guys for watching this episode. See you guys in the next one. Peace.